Chapter 4. Is there room in paradise for everyone? Walking always helped the maiden clear her head, although today she did not dare venture outside the tower. Since her revelation, she could no longer bear the vitriolic glares of the Rose Hollow citizens. They had every reason to hate, despise, and shun her from the world. As she walked, the maiden began to stew on the idea that it really was their world, and not hers. They worked to make their world a better place in so many small ways. Citizens baked bread, swept the roads, took care of each other's children, and a million other small gestures that added to the larger whole. Even if the maiden took on every burden, every responsibility this world had to offer, it would not balance the scales. Her actions destroyed a million towns with a million little kindnesses taking place each day. She dared not consider the debt she owed if she considered the kindnesses of every day unlived into the future. No, that was unnecessary. Even if the maiden worked for 1,000 years tirelessly, she'd only perhaps make amends for that final day. The day she had ended with her own power, without any consideration for the generations of happiness she stole. Could a monster, who stole so much from the world, lay claim to it? The maiden didn't know how. At the moment, she barely knew what she was going to do with her existence. The world had already not made sense before Ishin had told her the truth. Now the world made perfect sense, and somehow it was considerably worse. There had been a small part of her that believed that if she just had clarity, that if she knew everything that there was to know about what she'd done, some sort of peace would be granted to her. But if this was the price of knowing, how could she find any solace in the world? Her brooding was interrupted as she heard the grunting of effort in front of her. A human woman, no older than 30, with a mop of strawberry blonde hair, was carrying a large sack. The maiden recognized the material as steel-woven thread. It was heavy-duty and made for the transportation of weapons or war materials. The material was 20 times as heavy as common burlap for that reason. From the way the woman was struggling, her rail-thin arms shaking, the maiden could tell she wouldn't make it too much further. There was an immediate sigh of relief from the woman as the maiden took the sack from her shoulders. She slumped against the wall, hazel eyes looking to the ceiling as she drew in deep breaths. The maiden watched her face grow less red as she wiped the sweat from her forehead. "Thank you, miss," the woman said through gasps. "Oh, it's my pleasure," the maiden said. She tried to give a warm smile to the woman, hoping to buy herself a moment of respite after she was recognized. "You some sort of ether soul?" "Me? No, I'm just strong like this. If you'd like, I can help you carry this to where you're going." Stupid, the maiden thought. It was a stupid and awful offer to make considering everything she knew. Yet as she looked at this scrawny woman leaning against the wall, arms and legs shaking from exertion, the maiden knew Ishin would offer to help if she was here. She'd seek to ease this burden. "Oh, could you?" the woman replied. "I'm supposed to bring this to the top floor. I don't know if I could have made it all the way." "You'd make it there eventually," the maiden said as she slung the sack over her back. "But I'm sure everyone would prefer you didn't burst a lung." "Or my entire body, or your entire body," the maiden agreed. She reached out with a free hand and helped the woman off the wall. "Also, I'm Winnie," the woman said. "Probably should have opened with that. It's just been a busy few days. I got pulled here from another station on the Ring of Sculpting. Then I was supposed to be working with the refugees, but apparently they need me here for paperwork, but this is so obviously not paperwork and—" "Hey," the maiden said. "You can call me the maiden. It's good to meet you, Winnie. Trust me, you have nothing to worry about here. Ishin will take great care of you here." Winnie took another deep breath, seeming to calm down. The maiden started toward the nearest set of stairs as she let the woman talk and ask questions. Mostly Winnie talked about herself, which the maiden didn't mind. Just having a new person talk to her as if she was a person was fantastic. Honestly, it was the enrichment she'd been craving for years. Despite having Ishin, Nicholas, Kero, Navian and the others, it could still be lonely. Plus they knew who she was from the moment she'd awoken in Ishin's tower, and likely before she supposed. That could make things awkward, but this person was talking to her as if she was completely and utterly normal. There was something about that which caused an uncontrollable smile to break out over the maiden's face. At the point when Winnie stopped moving, the maiden was so happy and lost in the conversation that she didn't realize where she had been led. Before her, on the top floor of the tower, sat the pristine platinum doors that lead into the war room. This caused the maiden to go pale. Ishin and the high gods met here to discuss the war. Slowly, the maiden let her gaze slide to the steel-woven sack over her shoulder as Winnie rapped on the door. The realization that she should not be here hit harder than a necrodactus. With a quick intake of breath, she began to set the bag down, hoping to run as far away as her legs would take her, but it was far too late. The doors of the war room opened as out washed a flood of magic that made every hair on the maiden's body stand up straight. Winnie let out a gasp as the ambient magic of high gods flooded into the hallway like a sea diverted into a narrow valley. The situation became worse as from the room stepped an angel. Unfortunately, the maiden knew this one. Quellion, servant of the ruiner, stepped from the war room. The being stood as an enigma, an angel cloaked in the elegance of the ruiner's magic. Their black hair cascaded in waves, shimmering like oil. Their skin, a deep shade of ebony, exuded an aura of quiet power and ancient wisdom. Yet, their most captivating aspect was their wings. They appeared to be woven from ethereal smoke, constantly shifting and curling in delicate tendrils. These wings seemed almost intangible, a haunting blend of shadows and mist that glided silently through the air. However, the pristine vestments they wore stood in sharp contrast. The angels of the ruiner always wore pressed greys that held pins and flourishes to denote their often deeds. At least, that is what Ishin had told the maiden. As she looked at the angel's dress, she had no idea what it meant. The eyes of the angel fell upon first Winnie, then the maiden, and then the sack she was carrying. Mist began to leak from the wings of the angel, power swelling within, as rage stirred within them. This is what the maiden knew all too well. "Drop it, creature," Quellion said, voice like ice. The maiden nodded, her eyes not breaking Quellion's gaze, as she set the sack down at her feet and took 2 steps backward. "You," Quellion said, turning to Winnie, "you allow your package to be touched by an ether eater of all beings." "Wait, The high gods placed their trust in you, Winnie Bodeth, and you gave your burden to another. Already reprehensible, and yet you exacerbate the situation by giving your task to Ataxia." "I'm not called Ataxia anymore," the maiden whispered. "And yet it does not change what you are," Quellion replied. "The orders of the high gods were specific. If you consumed mere morsels of what's within, then the package is unusable." "I don't know how to do that," the maiden replied. "Lies come from the lips of ether eaters," Quellion said, "like rain from a thunderstorm. Do you believe us so ignorant, so naive, that your word would be believed in any capacity?" "Ask Ishin," the maiden said. But it was too late. Quellion turned his attention back to the now shaking courier. Winnie had tears in her eyes as the angel stepped closer. "Return your burden to where it was acquired, and receive a new one. Start your journey anew, bring it here, and do not let any hands other than yours grace it. Our enemies hide everywhere, Winnie." "Yes, sir. The high gods are merciful and shall allow you to correct your mistakes. However, if it should happen again, the charge shall be treason. A charge I know the ruiner would be happy to arbitrate." The maiden watched the exchange in stunned silence. Is this what they thought of her? As her gaze fell upon Winnie, a simple woman thrust from her home here, she saw the fear in her eyes. The maiden did what Ishin would do, and yet it resulted in this. It didn't make sense. How could her touch be treasonous if Ishin allowed her in this tower? "It made sense because you're a monster," the maiden thought. "The reason comes from all those moments where you damned yourself and others." How could she argue with that? She couldn't. Winnie's tears and fear were just the ironclad truth splayed before her, so that even a fool could see the truth. "Maiden," Quellion said. The maiden glanced at the angel. She felt her fists ball. It was the strangest thing that out of everything, the way that he said her name caused her the most fury. Ishin's lips made the name seem like a warm hug, a blanket on a snowy morning, or the gentle caress of... But this damn angel used the word as a cudgel. Worse, like Maiden encapsulated all their past, present, and future failings. As if her name was a metamorphosis from Ataxia into a new kind of monster. "You are to never interfere in the official business of the high gods again, under threat of destruction, by the ruiner themselves. The high gods' business is my business." The maiden knew the retort was a mistake, however her restraint was gone. She prepared for the hell that was to come, but instead, the angel only smiled. "If that is so, then I'm sure my master will be overjoyed," Quellion said as he turned to head back into the war room. With a flick of his fingers, the angel slammed the platinum doors behind him and left the hallway silent. That silence was broken by Winnie's struggling as she attempted to heft the sack once again. The maiden instinctively reached out a hand, but Winnie recoiled. Where once there was friendship, now there was fear. Quellion had made quick and efficient work of this woman. "Winnie, I'm so sorry," the maiden began. "Please go away," Winnie screamed. "Please, I don't want to die." There were so many things the maiden wished she could say, yet Winnie was right to be afraid. Her presence by itself posed a greater danger to her than a heavy sack ever did. The maiden supposed that even the gentlest monster crushed ants beneath its feet unknowingly. Perhaps it had no choice. Perhaps the only noble choice it had was to lie down and sleep, or die, rid the world of itself so that the menace of its being would never destroy the world around it. The maiden nodded to Winnie and left. She heard the sounds of the woman struggling behind her and prayed that she would be safe. "They aren't for sale," Yarrow said gruffly. The maiden frowned as she stared at the dead bouquet behind him. All the petals were turning brown, and the stems had wilted until they lay along the shelf behind the stand. These flowers were terrible, and yet she'd offered 100 silver coins for them. "Please, Yarrow," the maiden begged. "I'll do anything." The thick eyebrows of Yarrow furled as he crossed his arms. Behind the maiden, the crude was beginning to grow restless. She didn't have long, which the vendor of course knew. He still made a threat, though. "Leave or I'll call the police, who will call the angels, who will haul you off to God's know where." "Right," the maiden said with a nod. "Sorry to bother you." She turned on a heel, her legs carrying her away from the stand of pretty flowers not meant for her. At this point, all the flowers in the city weren't meant for her. As tears filled her eyes, the maiden sat down on a bench across the street. She had to figure out what she would do next. Sure, Ishin didn't care whether she got flowers or not, but, well, the maiden did love to see her smile. And from what she understood, it was a nice thing to do. The maiden's head fell into her hands as she thought. In the distance, she smelled the flowers as their wonderful scents filled the street. There were flowers all over the city. Surely there had to be a way to get some. Stealing. That was an option. But no, the maiden quickly tossed that idea. Ishin would hate it if she stole the flowers. It'd be better to give Ishin nothing at all if the alternative was taking them from a vendor. Even one as gruff as Yarrow still had a right to what he owned. "Excuse me, miss," a voice said from above her. The maiden peered upward to see a dwarven man dressed in artificer's leathers, holding a small bouquet of living flowers toward her. The dwarf himself had long brown hair that he kept in a bun on top of his head. His beard was well groomed, almost fluffy-looking, as it sat in a perfect oval on the side of his face. The man had flecks of soot around his pale blue eyes and across his fat nose as well. As the maiden looked at the rest of him, though, she saw that his clothes were spotless as if recently changed. He also had a second, bigger bouquet of flowers in his other hand. "They're for you," the dwarf said after a while. The maiden realised she'd been staring in shock. Thank you," the maiden said as she tentatively took the flowers. "Why?" "Yarrow can hold a grudge," the dwarf said with a shrug. "Seen him turn away people for all sorts of reasons. You seemed pretty bent out of shape bout, though. I mean, you offered 100 for some dead flowers. Figured if a person is willing to do that, they probably need flowers pretty bad." "Oh, yes," the maiden said. "Problems with your partner?" "Huh? Your lover? I figure that's the main reason a girl like yourself is so desperate to get some flowers, you know." "Oh, no, she's not my lover," the maiden said quickly. "But she's helped me all my life and she likes flowers, so I just thought—" "Heh, I understand now," the dwarf said as he took a seat on the bench. "I got me a woman like that too. Makes my stomach fill with grubs just thinking about her. I suppose these are a thank you gift for her, though, since she's been with me through my thinnest. She's probably the only reason that could get me to keep dealing with Yarrow. Damn him for having all her favourites, right?" "At least he's got them," the maiden replied, flashing a shy smile. "Well, you got me there," the dwarf replied. "Guess we'll keep having to come back to him then." "I don't think he'll sell to me anymore." "Come Kriya Day mornings," the dwarf said, rising. "He'll be still drunk as a skunk and you'll probably be able to get him to sell if you don't draw too much attention to yourself." "Isn't that a bit deceptive? Girl, you almost paid 100 silver for dead flowers. I think your soul is in balance with the gods if you're buying flowers at fair market value. Come on now." The maiden blushed at this before nodding in agreement. "You're very wise." "Gotta thank my partner for that," the dwarf responded. "That's what a good partner does, right? Helps you realise all the things you're missing." "I wouldn't know," the maiden said. "I've never had one of my own. Cobbles and cracks, really." Well, throw yourself out there a bit more. Maybe at this mysterious woman you're getting these flowers for. Oh no, she's beyond me. That's what I said about my lady, the dwarf responded. We've been seeing each other every day for more than 2 years now, though. Things are going better than I ever thought. It might just be the same for you, Mrs. You can call me the Maiden. Ah, mysterious, the dwarf said. Well, you can call me the Nuldren. It has been nice meeting you, the Maiden, but I'm running late for my lady. Nuldren gave her a parting wave as he disappeared into the crowds of people. The Maiden glanced down at her bouquet of flowers after he left. Perhaps today wasn't so bad after all. Knock, flowers, enter, tea, couch. Ishin put the new flowers into a vase, this time without needing to bring them back from the edge of death, with a cup of tea in hand. The Maiden had already wrapped herself snugly in a blanket as she sipped her own cup. The rays of the setting sun cascaded through the open windows, flooding Ishin's apartment in wondrous orange hues. Do you craft the sunset every night? The Maiden asked. Every night? No, I don't. When I first created Rose Hollow, I crafted 17,000 sunsets that repeat on a loop. Whoa, the Maiden said as she stared out the window. The sunset unfurled across the horizon like an artist's masterpiece, painted in resplendent hues of orange. The sky transformed into a canvas of fire, each stroke of colour perfectly placed. As the sun descended, its golden orb dipped toward the horizon, casting a warm, amber glow that caressed the landscape with tender intimacy. The clouds, brushed with streaks of tangerine and saffron, seemed to float like wisps of silk, their edges kissed by the fading light. This is an amazing one, the Maiden said in awe. You should see the one 2 days from now, Ishin said. It's one of my favourites. There are streaks of violet within the clouds that perfectly frame the skyline. We should watch it together. I'd like that, the Maiden said with a quiet smile. Quickly, though, the smile soured into a frown as the Maiden leaned back into the cushions of the couch. What's wrong, Maiden? Ishin said. Everything is getting worse, the Maiden said. She put her tea down and then faced Ishin, who wore a look of concern on her face. The god's eyes, in all their beautiful blue, were transfixed on the Maiden as the soft orange of the sunset illuminated her face. In this moment, the Maiden felt herself relax as she gathered her thoughts. Ever since I got this new name, things have gotten worse. I know that the world isn't going to change overnight. These things take time to change, but now, whenever anybody sees me, it somehow feels more terrible because they don't care about my name. They don't even care about who I am, Ishin. All that matters is who I used to be or who I might be. I don't know. Today I tried to help someone, a nice woman named Winnie, and she might have been killed because of it. Yarrow won't sell me flowers anymore. Everything feels so wrong, but now I get why they feel this way. Maybe they're right, and I am a monster. Why do I deserve to watch the sunset with you after I've done so much evil? You poor thing, Ishin replied as she brought the Maiden into a hug. The Maiden felt Ishin's warmth, her power, and her peace. In the glow of the setting sun, Ishin held her for a long time. The Maiden didn't know how much time passed. Somewhere in that time she began to cry, the hot tears streaming down her face as all the attacks of the world manifested on her face. Why did you save me? The Maiden croaked. She pulled away from Ishin's embrace, seeing the wet stain she left on the goddess's sweatshirt and the now darkening sky. The light was fading, yet Ishin's face was as clear to her as ever. It was twisted in concern which hurt, but the Maiden knew she needed to ask this question. Out of every other ether eater, you saved me. I was the one who destroyed the Ring of Quelling. I killed billions. Yet you helped me anyway. I have to know why. Ishin sighed in response, slowly grabbed the Maiden's hands and held her there. There was a moment, as the god prepared to speak, where the Maiden felt concern rise within her. Yet as Ishin spoke, the Maiden knew it was the truth. It was an accident, Ishin admitted. Originally, we thought that Calamity would be the one to appear. Your appearance surprised all of us that day. This was all an accident? The Maiden asked, horrified. She felt panic, fear and anguish all begin to rise within her. All of this had no meaning to it. Ishin had no plan for her. It was all a sick twist of fate that her monstrous self was domesticated and kept within this tower. But then, a soft hand pressed itself to the side of the Maiden's face as Ishin drew her attention back to her. I'm so glad it was you, she said. Just as before, the Maiden knew it was the truth. Maiden, when I see you, I see the very best in the world. All you do warms my heart because I know that you have every reason to give up. Yet through it all you have continued to rise above all of it. In your beauty, in your grace, I see the world that we're fighting to protect. You are the greatest accident to ever happen to me. My existence spans thousands of years and dimensions of consciousness, yet throughout all of space you take my breath away. How can you not? I've made 17,000 sunrises and even my best work cannot compare to your smile. Maiden, I can only brighten this sky. You can brighten my whole world. How small I am compared to you. The world around you seems dark, I know, but it can get darker. Everyone here doesn't know it yet, but your light keeps Rose Hollow shining despite everything the Titans throw at us. Fuck it. I don't think my siblings know that you're everything we're fighting for in this universe. It may seem trite or a euphemism for something grander, but know this. Everyone has value. Everybody matters. We are all connected to each other across this universe. When one of us ails, we all suffer for it in some way. Your suffering is the suffering of us all manifest in billions of different ways. They do not understand that every strike against you is a mutilation against themselves. When I say everybody matters, it is a truth I scream without any reservation or hidden veils. After this, Ishin drew the maiden close. The pull of her hands was soft, yet firm, as she brought the maiden to her own nose. Her gaze looked deep within her then, and the maiden could only guess what Ishin saw with her eyes. Whatever it was, the goddess's gaze was like that of an addict. In this entire city, this entire dimension, constructed by her, something that Ishin looked upon was the only thing in her world. You matter to me, maiden. One day they will realize that you matter to them too. I have faith in that. The light within you is too bright to be ignored by mortals and gods alike. I'm just so lucky I saw it first. Her face broke into a delighted smile, a smile that radiated joy and warmth, spreading through the maiden's bones, making her feel more whole. The maiden knew there was magic in that smile, but was unsure of the kind. All that she knew was that she wanted to bask in that magic forever. If you have faith, the maiden said, then that's enough for me. Good, Ishin replied. I don't mind having you all to myself for a bit longer anyway. After everything though, Ishin, with everything I've done, there's still a place for me. Yes. Is there room in paradise for everyone? Absolutely. Even the other ether eaters? Without a doubt, maiden, Ishin said. You're living proof of that. Then I know what I need to fight for, the maiden said. If everyone matters, then they do too. Ishin, I want to save them all. They're my people, the beings in the universe who know what it is like, and I know their pain too. If we save them, then everyone is better for it. After speaking, Ishin frowned. The god twirled her hair with one finger as she spoke. It would be very difficult. We almost all died last time we saved you, and the resources used were immense. I'll be honest, the high gods are wary of a second attempt. If something goes wrong, the worst-case scenario is that we lose the war. This time it was the maiden's turn to grab Ishin by the hands and stare into her eyes. She tried to summon the expression that Ishin gave her. It probably wasn't as beautiful and authoritative, but the maiden tried her best. Please, she began. I need to do this. It is what I have to do. Please, Ishin, help me. I need you. In response, the maiden watched Ishin warm herself up. The blood vessels in her face began to expand rapidly along with her eyes. For a moment, the maiden thought she might be summoning a great spell, but nothing came. Her magic was fluctuating too, which made the maiden very confused. Whatever Ishin's Id was doing was new to the maiden. Yes, Ishin squeaked. It was a vocal pitch that was new as well. The maiden assumed the confusion on her face was evident because Ishin quickly brought herself back up to a godly composure. Yes, maiden, I will support you. However, we will need to plead our case to the other high gods. At the very least, they will keep us both under a tight leash. I understand, the maiden said as she wrapped Ishin in a hug. The god was indeed warm, particularly around the face, and the maiden realized she had predicted this hug coming. We will need to create an airtight argument and plan, Ishin said, as the maiden continued to crush her in a hug. Of course, the maiden said, as she sprang off the couch. She proceeded to pace around the room, consumed in a joyful frenzy. We'll stay up planning tonight. Can you make us some more tea? We will need it. In fact, I can probably just move into the guest room for the time being until we complete this project. We'll spend every waking hour on this. Maiden? Well, yes, not every waking hour. I have training with Eleth Threndil. You have god stuff to worry about, and we have to watch the sunset in a few days. But every available moment we have will be dedicated to this. You cannot stay here tonight, Ishin said flatly. Huh? Or any other night? Ishin, you have a guest bedroom. Some may call it inappropriate. Ishin, the maiden said. Is something wrong? No, nothing, Ishin said as she rose off the couch and shuffled the maiden toward the door. We simply must maintain propriety in the coming days. The high gods must not have a reason to reject our proposal. At this point she had opened the door and the maiden was facing the dark hallway outside. She turned around, a confused look plastered on her face. Would they reject our plea if I stayed in your guest room? Yes, Ishin said and shut the door. Her face was curiously red once again.